He didn't walk away from love. He just refused to keep losing himself. That wasn't a complaint. It was a truth, and the beginning of an awakening that many men out there are silently living through. In the previous video, I told you about the kind of love that doesn't end with tears, but with silence. The silence of a man who tried for too long, in a relationship where he was never truly seen. And in today's video, I want to tell you the rest of that story. The part that few dare to name, that some people don't leave because they're giving up, but because they've finally chosen to return to themselves. There was a time he explained everything. Why he came home late, why he needed some quiet, why he no longer had sweet words like he used to. He believed that as long as he was sincere, she would understand. But then he realized, understanding was never what she truly wanted, and love was never something she truly listened to. One day, he stopped explaining, stopped justifying, stopped making peace while he himself was falling apart. And in the silence that followed, he found something no one had ever taught him to protect: peace. Now, he no longer needs anyone to feel complete, no longer pours coffee while fearing a glance, no longer sleeps next to someone and feels like he's somewhere unfamiliar. He no longer performs, no longer holds it in, no longer needs to be understood to know his own worth. This isn't a story about breaking up. It's a story about rebirth, about a man who finally chose to live as his true self. They say a man who's single after a certain age must have done something wrong, that he failed at love, that he wasn't enough, that if he were worthy, someone would have stayed. But here's the truth, and it's not loud, it's not angry, it's just steady. He's not single because he lost love. He's single because he learned what love should never cost. No one talks about the kind of silence that comes after the storm, after the arguments that solved nothing, after the long nights lying next to someone who hasn't really looked at you in years, after giving your best, again and again, to someone who never asked what it cost you to keep showing up. That kind of silence is sacred, because it's not about being alone. It's about finally being free from having to explain why you're tired all the time. He remembers the day he realized he didn't miss her. He just missed who he thought he was supposed to be, the version of himself he kept bending into, trimming away the quiet parts, polishing the pain, hiding the exhaustion. Now, when people ask him why he's still single, why he isn't dating, why he doesn't put himself out there, he doesn't offer reasons. Because some choices don't come from logic, they come from survival. From the moment you wake up and realize you haven't had a knot in your chest for weeks, and you'd rather keep that than chase butterflies again, there's a freedom in not having to report your every move, a clarity in spending a Sunday exactly how you want, a dignity in sleeping alone not because no one wants you, but because not just anyone gets access to your peace anymore. This isn't a rejection of women. It's not a war against love. It's simply an understanding that solitude isn't something to be feared. It's something to be respected. He chooses this life, the same way someone chooses stillness after years of running. Not because it's easier, but because it finally makes sense. He doesn't crave noise anymore. He doesn't need to fill every silence with validation or flirtation or the thrill of being chosen. He already chose. He chose himself, his quiet mornings, his steady evenings, his unshakable center. And no, it's not that he couldn't love again. It's that he now knows the kind of love he'd need is so rare, so unintrusive, so deeply safe that it may never come. And that thought doesn't scare him. It calms him. Because he's built something far more reliable than chemistry or romance. He's built peace, not the kind that comes in between the highs and lows, the kind that stretches across days, months, and years without apology. So when they say he must be lonely, they're wrong. He's not lonely. He's just finally out of reach for anything that costs more than it gives. Love used to mean forever. Now, it sounds like another weight to carry. He remembers the kind of love that came wrapped in promises, the kind that walked down an aisle with trembling hands and eyes full of dreams, the kind that said, "I do," and meant it, at least at the time. Back then, love felt like the answer, like the safest place on earth. But over time it became something else. Not overnight, not all at once, slowly, and then all at once. It began with the small things, a raised voice over something forgettable, a cold shoulder that lasted a little longer than before, a conversation that turned into a debate, then into an argument, then into a standoff that stretched through the night. He remembers standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at the floor while her voice cut through the silence. Words sharp, not because of what they meant, but because of how they were thrown. The kind of arguments where no one wins, but everyone bleeds. And it wasn't just the fighting. It was the feeling that he was no longer allowed to breathe the way he used to. The home that once held peace became a place where he measured every step, every word. Where silence wasn't shared, it was weaponized. He gave everything: time, energy, patience. But no matter how much he poured in, the well always felt empty. The more he gave, the less he recognized himself. Until one day, he realized he wasn't living, he was managing. Managing moods, managing expectations, managing his own discomfort like it was part of the job. Then came the money, the slow erosion of autonomy. Small decisions turned into negotiations. Budgeting felt like asking for permission, and when things fell apart, so did his control. Suddenly, accounts were split, assets divided, and years of work reduced to numbers on a page. But what cut deeper than any financial loss was the loss of space. His time was no longer his. His evenings belonged to obligation. His mornings started with tension. The quiet parts of his soul, the ones that needed stillness to breathe, were constantly interrupted by needs that weren't his. He didn't hate her. That was the cruelest part. He loved her deeply. But love became something he had to survive, not something he could rest in. It felt like walking on a wire, always trying to balance, always trying to be enough. And when it finally ended, there was no dramatic collapse. Just a man standing in the middle of his living room, alone, hearing silence, real silence for the first time in years. And he realized he wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of going back. Now, when he hears the word love, he doesn't flinch. But he doesn't lean in either, because he knows what it cost. He knows how easy it is to lose yourself while trying to hold on to someone else. He doesn't want to debate feelings at midnight. He doesn't want to manage someone else's insecurity while trying to stay calm. He doesn't want to hand over his time, his space, his peace, and get tension in return. He wants something simpler, quieter, maybe even rarer. He wants peace more than passion, presence more than performance. And if that means staying single, so be it. Because once a man has carried the weight of a love that drained him, he never forgets what it felt like to finally set it down. There was a time when he shaped himself around the people he loved, softened the edges, held his tongue, adjusted his pace. Not because he was weak, but because he believed that compromise was a form of care. He thought if he could just be more agreeable, more predictable, more what they needed, then maybe they'd stay. But somewhere along the way, he lost the sound of his own voice. Now, in the quiet of his own space, he hears it again. Not loud, not urgent, just steady, honest, familiar. Happiness, he's learned, isn't about who's sitting across from him. It's about how he feels when no one is watching. It's in the small, ordinary moments that once went unnoticed, now felt deeply. Like the smell of fresh coffee in the early morning when the world is still asleep. The kind he grinds himself, not because anyone will thank him, but because he enjoys the ritual. It's in the way the sunlight drips through the blinds and falls across the kitchen table. In the way he holds a book without checking the time, letting the story pull him in without interruption. Sometimes, happiness is sitting in his parked car, engine off, no destination in mind. Just music, a quiet hum in the background, and the feeling that no one needs anything from him right now. He doesn't have to explain why he's quiet. He doesn't have to match someone else's energy. He doesn't have to smile when he doesn't feel like smiling. He's no longer interested in being chosen. He's interested in choosing himself, not in a selfish way, but in a way that says, I matter, even when I'm not performing. I belong, even when I'm not pleasing. I'm enough, even when no one's clapping. The truth is, happiness found him not when someone else finally loved him the right way, but when he stopped asking love to fix what only self-respect could restore. And now, his life is simpler, not emptier, just quieter, more intentional. He eats when he's hungry, sleeps when he's tired, works with focus, rests with purpose, and on most days he doesn't need anything more than that. Because happiness, for him, is no longer about being understood by someone else. It's about finally understanding himself. Some lessons leave no scars. Others leave silence that never breaks. Divorce doesn't end with a signature. It doesn't finish when the paperwork is filed or the keys are dropped on the counter. For a man who gave everything to build a life, it ends slowly, quietly, in pieces. He didn't just lose a marriage. He lost the rhythm of his days, the sound of little feet running down the hallway, the shared rituals Sunday mornings with cartoons playing in the background, bedtime stories cut short by yawns, the warmth of being needed. And then, all of it was gone. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow unraveling. The house remained, but it echoed differently. He lost time with his children, not because he wanted to, not because he stopped showing up, but because the court reduced fatherhood to weekends and holiday rotations. He watched them grow up in photos and text messages, saw them change through second-hand updates. He smiled when he was supposed to, but deep down, he was grieving moments he would never get back. Then came the financial cost. The years of building, saving, planning, all reduced to negotiations. The home he worked for, gone. Retirement delayed. Bank accounts split like battle trophies. He didn't care about the money as much as what it represented. The effort, the sacrifice, the quiet pride of being able to provide. And suddenly, it was all itemized and reassigned. But what hurt more than anything he lost on paper was what he lost inside himself. He became a stranger in his own story. A man who once had direction, now waking up with no map. Who once had purpose, now questioning what any of it meant. The man who held everything together, now piecing himself back without anyone noticing. He learned things no one teaches. That not every relationship breaks clean. Some bleed out slowly, even after they end. That forgiveness is less about the other person, and more about learning how to live with the memory without letting it define you. That sometimes closure doesn't come. And that's not a flaw in the system, it's part of the price. He learned that anger is easy. Bitterness is even easier. But neither builds anything worth living in. So he chose something else. He chose to rebuild. Not the same life, not the same version of himself, but something quieter, steadier. A life where his peace doesn't depend on someone else's mood. Where his worth isn't measured by how much he can hold together for someone else. He learned that love isn't always the hero of the story. Sometimes it's the teacher, and the tuition is steep. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Not to walk away unscathed, but to walk away more honest, more self-aware, more unwilling to ever lose himself like that again. Because some lessons don't come with applause or understanding. Some only come after you've sat alone on the floor of an empty house, wondering what it was all for. And if you've ever been there, you know. You know that silence, and you know how sacred it becomes. He's not afraid of love. He's afraid of losing himself again. There was a time when love felt like the goal, the prize, the thing you were supposed to find to feel complete. He chased it with everything he had, believed in the fairy tale, endured the storms, adjusted, compromised, stayed when it was easier to leave, and through it all he told himself, this is what love takes. But now, he sees things differently. He doesn't reject love, he just no longer worships it. He doesn't run from connection. He simply refuses to sacrifice his peace to keep it. Peace, that quiet, steady rhythm he's built from the ground up, is something he holds sacred now. It's in the sound of his home in the early morning, where the only thing moving is sunlight crawling across the floor. It's in making his own breakfast, setting his own pace, walking from room to room without tension following behind him. It's in knowing that nothing is expected of him today except to live, to breathe, to exist without pressure. He no longer wakes up checking his phone for emotional landmines. He no longer rearranges his day to accommodate someone else's mood swings. The silence in his life isn't empty, it's clean. It doesn't ask. It doesn't demand. It simply is. And in that space, he's remembered who he is when he's not trying to be someone else's version of enough. He plans his own days now, starts slow, ends slower, reads without distraction, works without apology. Rest feels like rest, not recovery. There's no performance, no pretending, no walking on eggshells to avoid unnecessary conflict. His home is his sanctuary, not a battlefield disguised as a relationship. It's not that he's given up on companionship. He just knows what it costs to be constantly available, emotionally flexible, and endlessly giving. And he's not willing to pay that price again for the illusion of love. If love returns to his life, it will have to sit gently beside him, not pull him out of himself. It will have to understand that peace isn't negotiable anymore. He's done proving his worth. He's done confusing chaos for passion. He's done believing that love is only real when it hurts. Because now, he knows the difference between being needed and being drained. And peace, quiet, ordinary, soft-spoken peace, has become the standard he refuses to lower. He's not alone because he fears connection. He's alone because calm became more valuable than constant compromise. And that, too, is love. Just a different kind, one that starts within, and no longer begs to be completed by someone else. People often ask him, "Why are you still alone?" As if solitude is something that needs to be explained, as if being single past a certain age means you've failed at something, as if not sharing your bed is a sign that something's missing. But they never ask the more important question, not, "Why is he alone?" but, "What has he found in being alone?" Because if they asked that, they'd see something else entirely. They'd see a man who wakes up when his body is ready, not when someone else's alarm tells him to. They'd see the quiet joy of slow morning's coffee brewed not for anyone else, but for himself, enjoyed in stillness with no need for small talk. They'd see routines shaped around his own needs, not someone else's preferences. He's discovered the rhythm of his own mind, the way it thinks when it's not being interrupted, the way ideas come back when he gives them space. He writes again, paints again, works in silence without feeling guilty. There's time now, time for creation, for reflection, for simply being. He's built friendships that are honest and effortless, conversations that don't require pretending, laughter that isn't tied to performance. No keeping score, no hidden tensions, just connection that flows because it's real. He's learned how to sit with himself, to hear his own thoughts without needing someone to fill the quiet. He's realized that his company is not just enough, it's nourishing, and that freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about not having to explain why you need what you need. There's a kind of strength that grows in solitude, not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet certainty of a man who knows who he is and no longer needs permission to be it. Loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of peace. And he chose peace. He chose a life where calm isn't a break between arguments, but the foundation of every day, where decisions are made without fear of conflict, where silence isn't a warning sign, it's a gift. They think he's missing out. On love, on excitement, on the messiness of connection. But what he's found is something deeper. Not a life without love, but a life where love doesn't have to come at the cost of himself. So the next time someone wonders why he's alone, they'd do better to ask what he's discovered since choosing to be, because behind the quiet, there's a man who didn't walk away from the world. He just walked closer to himself. There is a quiet revolution happening, not loud, not televised, but visible if you know where to look. It's in the small apartments with worn-in chairs that only one man sits in. It's in the morning walks taken without needing to check in. It's in the kitchens where a single cup of coffee brews and no one asks when he'll be back. A generation of men is choosing something different. Not because they've been rejected, but because they've learned to stop rejecting themselves. He's not broken. He just rebuilt and didn't want to open the door again. These men aren't hiding. They're not bitter. They're not stuck in the past. They've simply seen what love can cost when it isn't right. They've watched themselves disappear in the name of being the good man, the provider, the one who stays. And now they're choosing something bolder than chasing approval. They're choosing clarity. They're not hard to find. You'll see them at the gym before sunrise, earbuds in, eyes steady. You'll pass them at bookstores, hands tracing over covers without rush. You'll spot them driving alone, not aimless, but peaceful, not lost, just no longer running after someone else's destination. They're not angry at women. They're just tired of being told they're only valuable if they're partnered, that a man alone must be a man unwanted. But the truth is, they are wanted by many. They're just no longer available to anyone who doesn't understand the cost of disturbing their peace. They've lived long enough to know what doesn't work. They've tried, stayed, adjusted, and now they move differently, with caution, with wisdom, with a kind of stillness that only comes from having nothing left to prove. This is a generation of men who no longer measure success by the weight of a ring or the size of a dinner table. They measure it by how many mornings they wake up with a calm mind, how many nights they fall asleep without a lump in their throat, how many days pass without needing to be someone else just to be accepted. And if you're one of them, know this: you're not alone. You're not strange for wanting space. You're not cold for craving simplicity. You're not selfish for protecting what you've rebuilt. There's a strength in knowing who you are after everything you've lost. And there's a deeper strength in knowing you won't lose yourself again, not for anyone. So when people wonder why so many men are choosing this life, they rarely see the full picture. They see solitude and assume sadness, but they don't see the healing, the quiet triumph, the dignity in not needing to be needed. This isn't a story about giving up. It's a story about finally waking up to yourself, to your needs, to a life that doesn't require fixing, only living. And you're not the only one who chose this. You're part of something larger, a quiet community of men who walked through fire and came out not with scars but with standards. So stay as you are, steady, whole, unapologetically alone and finally free. If you've ever chosen silence over drama, calm over chaos, solitude over pressure, you're not strange. You're just finally aligned with yourself. This life, the one built on stillness, on clarity, on boundaries that don't bend with someone else's expectations, didn't happen by accident. It's not a retreat. It's not bitterness. It's not fear. It's a conscious decision. A man doesn't wake up one day and decide to live alone because it's easier. He gets there after trying everything else, after giving, explaining, sacrificing, and slowly realizing that the greatest betrayal wasn't what others did to him, it was what he allowed them to do to his peace. So he reclaims it. Not with noise, not with blame, but with space, with quiet mornings, with firm decisions, with the realization that solitude isn't punishment, it's protection. Not from the world, but from the version of himself he used to be when he thought he had to earn his worth by carrying everything alone. This is what living awake looks like. It's knowing you could date again, but not at the cost of your clarity. It's knowing you could open your door, but only for someone who doesn't knock to fix you, test you, or tame you. It's being content even if that knock never comes. Because now, your life is not about being chosen. It's about choosing yourself every single day. And if you're watching this, feeling the quiet hum of recognition in your chest, then know this: you're part of something unspoken. A silent brotherhood of men who didn't collapse when it all fell apart. They stood up, took inventory, and began again. You don't need to explain why you live this way. The world may never understand it. That's fine. This life wasn't built for applause. It was built for peace. So if this reflection feels like your own, leave your trace, a comment, a word, a quiet nod in the form of presence. Let another man know he's not the only one walking this path. And if you ever need a reminder that this choice is sacred, come back to this space. Because here, we don't shout to be heard. We sit in silence and know we're not alone.